Hi, my name is Antoine and I'm a shamanic healer and ceremonialist. And today I wanted to carry on with this series about shamanism and animism basics and make a very brief video about ancestors and how are they relevant to our everyday life and where do they fit in this shamanistic and animistic worldview and practice. I wanted mostly to speak about ancestral healing. From our ancestors we inherit patterns of certain of them can be very positive patterns. It can be gifts, and we may find out also that we carry those gifts, and maybe some even of the things today we consider or experience as gifts, talents, we may find that they've been developed by our ancestors, and that happens often when you do ancestral work, to find out that some ancestors were actually doing things similar and finding joy in things similar to what you are currently doing. And then there are also more heavy or contracted or dense patterns, and in many cases those correspond to various forms of trauma, and that trauma includes, you could say, even for some of our ancestors who have been perpetrators of unjust or violent things or different types of transgressions. And when I speak about transgressions there are, maybe I'll go further into this in another video, but some even transgressions are transgressions in a certain context. For example, today might in many contexts be not a big thing for someone to break his vows as a priest or a would-be priest, and completely change his direction and route and say, well, this is not for me. At a certain time this may have been considered as something really, really bad, and so in that context this may have created a contraction because the person could not carry on through this experience in a fully present, in a fully conscious and way, and by letting his or her emotions flow in order to really go through this and come out on the other side in a harmonious way, or at least a fairly fluid way. So these patterns, these harmonious patterns, usually are around certain forms of trauma, and when those things are not recognized or they cannot be fully experienced by ancestors, then it's likely that some of this experience will be passed on to certain people in the following generations, and usually at least one person in the following generations. This is not a curse. This is not something you can't do anything about. This is, you may have identified, that there are things happening in your life you cannot quite figure out, that are repetitive. They seem to have the same meaning. They seem to have the same pattern, or they may also be, I'll give you an example. Also, some people have a tendency to store great amounts of food, and I mean great amounts of food and basics, huge amounts of food, flour and sugar and stuff, and they'd say, well, I don't know why, but just in case. And in many cases you find that this is an experience of an ancestor in one of the great wars, but then this pattern of experiencing extreme lack and fear of lack, really, maybe wasn't spoken, maybe could not be given back to life after the wars ended. So maybe this is a simple and funny or slightly humorous example, but it does exist. And so you may even have patterns you cannot explain, but you can even see that this is strange, or why am I doing this? Why do I feel a certain fear around certain situations, very specific situations, and I cannot relate this, for example, to my childhood, or I cannot relate this to my family history, etc. So, to make this a brief introduction, how do we heal those things? In many cases, if there's been a transgression, and of course there are big transgressions like murder and different forms of abuse, and this is, as a victim, this would be also, for our ancestors, that would be to experience those things and not find justice, not be able to find justice or a sense of peace, at least some sense of peace and justice, and staying really stuck in fear or anger or disempowerment. And on the other hand, for some of our ancestors who are perpetrators, and again you find both in families, it may be just not just, it may be just the guilt around this, or maybe lack of guilt, just dying and going, oh, this didn't happen, or that was okay, and then another generation goes, that was okay, or let's not speak about it. And that's one of the keys also. Usually there's, around those experiences of perpetrating and of being a victim, the silence is created. So denial may be a tacit thing, the family agrees not to speak about it, or the person doesn't speak about it to his or her own family. Some silence is installed. On a level, the family, everyone in the family knows, the unconscious of the family knows, and this is why it's coming out regularly. And this is coming out not as a curse, it's coming out in order for it to be made conscious. So first step is restoring the story, and you can do all kinds of things for this investigation. I'll come back on what tools you could use. Restoring some bits of the story, and then another crucial step after that will be to help the story be spoken and the emotion flow through, whatever the emotion is there. And in that process, ritual is a very important part. So creating a ritual space in order for that emotion to be able to flow, and to be able also to word what's being experienced, or also if one wants to bring reparation. And as a conscious person today in this generation, so you are opening up that contraction, really. You are restoring the story, you are helping the narration, the unconscious and silent narration arise, you are allowing emotion to flow through, and you are creating ritual in order to bring harmony. And in that ritual you are asking for higher or transpersonal forces to help you in that healing. That's, you're not doing this with your own strength, really. You're asking for those forces to come in and help restore things. So that connection to the transpersonal, the divine, the spirit world, whatever you want to call it, is key. And now a very important part is all of this can be done, and in my opinion the best way to do it with an ancestral guide. And that would be a very wise ancestor somewhere in your line who can have visibility on what's happening for you, and who can guide you along the way, and is giving this crucial thing of giving a connection to a spirit world, to a transpersonal world, and even connecting you to other forces like gods, goddesses, or different religious figures. In that sense, I mean, for example, for Christians might be the Great Mother as in the form of Mary, or certain faces of Mary. But it doesn't have to be religious in that sense, but it doesn't exclude also that. So those are some of the key steps for you to do this. You can, I'll come back probably on the processes of ancestral healing with ancestor guides. In the meantime, also some other ways are doing, for example, family constellations, which is not necessarily a shamanistic process, but does come from an animistic process. And of course, you can go towards a shamanic person, again, exercise your judgment, because there's a lot of claims made, but someone can also go into that field and look at what is going on and help you and bring back information, help you make repairs, mediate with the troublesome ancestors, and come back. And if it is a really, you could say, adequate healer, he will give you ancestral rituals in order to help you complete that process, because that ancestral process requires, in my own experience of working with people, and in my own experience also, for you as a descendant to take responsibility to some level, and not guilt, but responsibility for what your ancestors have experienced. And in that sense, the rituals you are going to make are going to be an important part to complete the ancestral healing or the ancestral healing sessions. I hope this is helpful, and I wish you a very good day. Blessings.